a little while ago, I made a video on a 3D printed Spider-Man, and quite a few of you did want me to actually go ahead and print out the rest, put it together, and do a whole review on it. And I am gonna do that. But what I really wanna do is do an update on kind of how all of that's coming along. Because I think the idea of 3D printing action figures is definitely really interesting. And I think a lot of people would wanna know kind of what it would take or not to be able to do that. So let's just get straight into it. One of the people that commented on that last video was telling me how one of the things that you gotta be really careful about when doing resin printing is the potential toxicity of using resin printed objects. And it wasn't the toxicity of the material itself as much as the toxicity of the resin dust that gets created from the parts rubbing together. And let me show you what I mean by that. So this here is the original one that I showed in that video. And if you look right around here, right around the base of the neck, you can see that it's a little bit white, it's a little bit powdery, because if I move it around, then what happens is it's rubbing against itself enough to create this powdery substance. So you can kind of see that on there now, and you can see I can rub that away, and it's a little bit on my finger, if you can tell. Now the dust itself isn't toxic, but it's the fact that it's so fine that if you were to breathe that in, then over time having enough of that in your lungs could be really harmful to you. So the suggestion was to use a different kind of resin. So there is a company out there called Resione, I think I'm pronouncing that right, and they make a special resin designed specifically for this express purpose of creating action figures, right? So I suspect that they are trying to make sure that the parts that rub together don't become dust as they rub together. Now, what I did before I ordered that resin though, was I tried kind of making my own, because one of the other things that came out of that video were people saying that in order to have less fragile prints, that I actually want to do a mix with flexible resin. So I purchased flexible resin, and I did I think I did a half and half mix with the regular resin that I was using, and that's this guy. So this is the one that I made with my own 50-50 formula. And just so you can see, here is the original and here is the newer one. So the original one is a much lighter gray, and the newer one's a little bit darker. So really what we want to do is we want to test and see if it still has the same rubbing issues. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of move the head around, and I can even already see on one side of it how like dust is starting to form. I think you can see it all around the neck, around the base of the neck. So clearly that's not going to work either. That's something that we want to avoid. We don't want to be breathing that in. And even if breathing that in wasn't necessarily an issue, that's not something you want on your action figures anyway. You don't want them to be literally turning to dust as you pose them, right? So the Resi1 resin, I went ahead and ordered it. And what's kind of fun is that the one I ordered is actually salmon colored. So that's what we have. And let's see what we got. So here's how it looks. And again, for comparison's sake, here is the original one that I made. This one is just the standard resin. This is not the mix. So you can see that they, of course, look pretty much exactly the same in terms of design because they are the same exact file. And what we're going to try here is we're going to try the same thing. And we're going to go ahead and just do our articulation and move it around. And I had to look closely because I can't tell if it's because of the color or if it's not actually happening, but I can't see any dust forming from the parts rubbing together, which is great. So I'll go ahead and just wipe as well just to see, and I'm not seeing anything on my fingers at all. So I would call that a success. This definitely makes sense to go ahead and move forward with. And with that in mind, I have a whole baggie of parts. So let's take a look at what I have so far. So I've pretty much printed out everything that I need to put together Spider-Man, and it's been quite a ride so far. Let's just start looking at some pieces. So first, I want to show some hands. So here is a left fist, and I think that looks awesome. I mean, other than it being in the salmon color, right? So it's not even close to the color that it should be, but that's really cool. Here is the ring where the zip tie would go through and you would attach it. Here is one of the crawling hands, and I think he did a spectacular job with the design. That looks really cool. And even the palm looks really good. And of course, you can't have Spider-Man without a web hand. So That looks really good too, nice and natural. Now I'm still really new to all of the resin 3D printing stuff, and I'm still learning a lot, and I had a bunch of failed prints. So besides pieces that just didn't print at all, there are also pieces that I decided to print multiple times, and you'll see why in a second. So first, I just want to show you that this is the back chest piece. So specifically, that's right side up, and you can see that once I do start putting it together, that he's going to connect like that, and that's how he's going to look. And that's going to be really cool once it's all put together. But what's really so cool to see is just that level of detail that you're getting out of the print, because you can see the texture of the costume the way we see it in the movies. And it's super, super cool. I'm really excited about that. Now, print failures. It was a combination of me needing to make sure that the bed was leveled, as well as having the correct settings. The Resione Resin needed to have special settings that they recommended, and I was able to download and apply them. So that part of it wasn't hard, but it was my own lack of experience to not even realize that I should have taken that extra step and looked to see if there were additional settings that I should have been using. But once I got that figured out, then I was able to at least get parts printed with more success. Now, with that said, here are some of the problem parts that I had. So first up, I want to take a look at the bottom. This will be Spider-Man's pelvis and his butt region, right? And we have this piece, which the file calls his belt. And you can see how it's supposed to fit kind of right on top, just like that. And it looks okay. It's not the worst thing, but for me, I'm a little OCD and I wanted it to fit perfectly. So first, let's try to get that as close fitting as we can. And you can see it's not quite right. And if you look closer, the reason for that is because when I printed it, I printed this side to be the top and this was the bottom. So this is the part that was connecting to the build surface. And when you look at the actual bottom, you can see all of those bumps. So all of those bumps are where the supports were in order to actually create the piece itself, right? So because all the bumps exist, it means that it's not gonna sit perfectly flush with that piece. So after a little bit of research and recommendations, I found out that what I should be doing is angling the pieces in order to get it to print without needing as many supports. So that's what I tried next, and that's this piece. So this piece also still looks like it's going to be pretty good. And when we try that test fit, you can actually see on this side, it actually fits pretty flush, but this side is still problematic. And as you'll see, the issue is because this side still ended up needing supports. So I went ahead and did it one more time. And this time, so you can see that's the bottom side that's going to be connecting. And this is the top side. So what I ended up doing was I went ahead and just flipped it and printed it upside down instead. The thought here was that this part is where the abdomen is going to be sitting inside of. So because that's not going to need to be perfectly flat anyway, it wasn't going to be that big of a deal. So now I have a perfectly flush piece, and that looks way, way better, and I'm much happier about that. Now, again, this side is perfectly smooth, but I do want to show you that even though this is the top, here's the bottom, so you can see that there are bumps from the supports that were there as well. So I could try reprinting that too, but honestly, I'm not too worried about this part of it. But if I were to try it again, I'd probably try it at like this kind of angle so that the supports were sitting in there like that. All right, so here's a leg piece, and I ended up having a similar kind of problem. So as you can see, the web lines mostly show up, but we're missing a web line right up here. And while normally you don't think that would be a problem, once you get the piece that it's supposed to have, you can see that having the missing lines does make it look a little strange. So, same idea, I went ahead and printed a new one. And the new one has all the lines going the whole way around the top. And that's approximately how it should look once the pieces are all put together. Now, I do need to do a little bit of trimming, because that shouldn't be there, obviously, but it shouldn't be too bad overall. The last one that I was having problems with that was really bugging me is that abdomen piece that I was talking about. So this is the one that will be sitting inside of the belt piece. And here is the actual front of it, which this itself isn't the problem. It's this back side that is. So with the pieces together, you can see that there's a slight hole gap right there. There's a similar gap / hole over here, and that's because of the way that I had it supported. So I tried it a couple of different ways. So what I ended up doing is just, again, completely changing the orientation, and now I've got a piece that doesn't have those support holes / gaps at all. And when I put it on, it looks like one complete piece, which is cool. And so that guy is gonna sit on top of this one. And that's approximately how it'll look once I start getting it all really put together and painted as well. I'm really excited by this. This is a super fun project. Sorry it's taking so long, but I am kind of learning along the way. So now I still don't consider myself a very experienced painter, so this will be my first time really painting an entire figure as well. I do have some primer that I'm gonna be using for this that's meant specifically for like acrylics and plastics like this, so hopefully that helps a lot. I got some Vallejo paints to use as well. I have a nice paintbrush to use. So if you aren't already subscribed, then please do that so that you can see how it turns out once I actually get it all put together. And otherwise, you should probably watch my Spider-Man buyer's guide, where you'll see some Spider-Man that you may not have seen before right over here.